All right, let's get started. So we give the speaker enough time. Thank you again for folks joining us this morning. It's really wonderful to see you and have you. And thanks for continuing to support our webinar series at the Center for the Climate Adaptation Research Center here at UC Davis. My name is Eric Chu. I happen to be one of the co-directors of the center. I see some familiar faces and names in the attendance list, so that's wonderful. Just several quick notes before we launch into the session this morning. For those of you, all of us are logging in through Zoom, and so you're currently in listen-only mode. Hopefully, everybody's muted. If you have questions during the session, or if you have clarification things, please type those into the chat. I will bring those up at the end of the session so that we give the speaker, it's the whole however minutes is needed to share thoughts. So the session, sorry for being a little bit incoherent. I'm just looking at the bullet points here. The session is being recorded, and so folks can refer back to this a little later on. Sophia is our research assistant that's helping out. And so folks who have technical difficulties or anything happening during the session itself, please also type those requests into the chat box. Sophia will be monitoring the chat box for those sorts of things throughout the session this morning. And so again, thanks for being here. Next slide, please, Sophia. This morning, we have the wonderful privilege of welcoming Marina Rakhlin, who is the Program Director of Strategic Partnerships in Climate and Sustainability at IBM Research. Marina works with universities, governments, enterprises, and nonprofits to expedite discovery and implementation of solutions posed by climate change. IBM Research, the technologies that IBM Research develops include geospatial analytics for climate impact modeling and prediction, natural carbon sequestration solutions, and accelerated discovery of new raw materials for carbon capture. Marina is a UCD alum. She got her bachelor's in international relations here at UC Davis, and then went on to get an MBA at the Wharton School at UPenn. And with that, I will hand it over to Marina. And thanks again, Marina, for joining us this morning.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's so exciting to be here. And I want to thank Professor Chu and Sophia for helping organizing this. And also, I see Professor Barbato has joined. So thank you so much for sharing this opportunity with me. It's great to be back on the virtual campus of Davis. I'm definitely overdue for a physical visit, and I'm hoping to visit Davis later this year. So before I dive in, I see that there is a mix of folks on the call, and I know that the recording is also going to be available. So I wanted to say just a few words about my career progression, because I know that oftentimes that's quite interesting, especially for students in the audience. So when I went to Davis, I studied international relations with economics emphasis. And after graduation, I dove right into the technology world, and I moved to the Bay Area, and I was working doing internal business implementation consulting at some of the technology firms. After that, I moved over to the East Coast and did my MBA at Wharton with emphasis on entrepreneurship. And upon graduation, I actually was the first employee to join a company that a classmate of mine started after graduating from the same program. So we worked on a startup from an idea on a napkin and scaled it all the way to an office in Manhattan, which was quite an interesting ride, but definitely a crazy roller coaster startup experience. The startup was in the fashion analytics space, and again, I got to leverage my technology skills and background. After that, I joined another company, which was more of a scale-up as their director of product and strategy. It had around 100 people when I joined, focused on marketing automation space. And then after that, I decided I need something a little bigger on my resume, and I went and joined IBM Research when opportunity presented itself, which at that time had 380,000 people worldwide. So it's quite a big change from a startup, but it's been a very interesting experience. I'm part of the research division, which I will dive into a little bit more detail later on. But I've always been on the cusp of translating technology into business opportunity, which is really where my heart lies, and it's been a fascinating journey. And about 4 years ago, we started a strategy around climate and sustainability, which I'll also talk a little bit more about later in my presentation. But that's really where I realized that this is where I want to spend my career and focus on identifying opportunities for early stage technology to be applied to the climate and sustainability space, where we desperately need solutions that are scalable and can be applied out of the lab as quickly as possible. So with that as an introduction, let me share my presentation and get started. So today I will talk about a couple of things. So first, I will start at a higher level. I'll talk about the opportunity that we're seeing in the climate and sustainability space, about some of the trends in terms of venture capital investment, which generally translates into the amount of innovation that is currently happening in the startup and the scale-up space. Then I'll talk about IBM and its positioning on climate and sustainability, some of the very exciting work we're doing, some of the products and initiatives we are driving in this space. And then I'll zoom in on IBM Research, which is the division that I'm a part of, and talk about some of the very interesting partnerships that I've been able to form and fortunate to drive for our research team, which right now covers 10 global locations. And finally, at the very end, we're definitely going to have time for questions. So please make sure that you have those ready. So first, a few years back, I used to start my presentations with the slides capturing the rise in greenhouse gases emissions and the average temperatures shifting and warming. But I think everybody on the call is very well aware of the challenge that climate change is posing to the world and global communities. So what I do now is the morning of presentation, I just go on newsfeed and I capture what are some of the latest headlines in climate space. And, the more you look at those, it's a random selection, but it generally captures extreme weather events. It captures the impact on communities. And it also captures the importance of adaptation moving forward and what are some of the solutions that are being developed to address those, which is why I think this webinar series and just the focus of the center is so critical moving forward. And then what you're seeing on the right-hand side, it's a capture from one of my favorite sources of inspiration. It's environmentalgraffiti.org, which takes climate change data and then turns it into artwork by different graphic artists. And a few of the IPCC reports on the cover actually feature the artwork that emerged from that organization. And here what you're seeing captured is the sources and sinks of CO2 greenhouse gas emissions. And what you're seeing on the top is the Green Mountain. That's how much, that's the sources of carbon, and then below that is the different sinks that are available. And as what you can see here, it's disproportionate. If we keep moving on the trajectory where we're moving, unfortunately, there's just not enough sinks to capture all the carbon being emitted. And that really underlines the need for us to rethink fundamentally how we are operating as a society. And I think technology is really key that will help us solve that and expedite solutions to where we're emitting less and less, we're capturing more, and the future operations are a lot more sustainable. So let's talk about the opportunity and growth in the climate tech space. When we started work on climate and sustainability at IBM Research and formed a focused strategy around it 4 years ago, this was definitely not the landscape that we were seeing in terms of venture investment. And fast forward just a couple of years, we're seeing tremendous investment going into green energy transition. So renewables are definitely having a great momentum and support. We're also seeing a lot more deals from the venture community in agriculture, as the whole idea of how do we leverage the land, how do we grow food, and the whole life cycle is shifting rapidly. And of course, we're looking into transportation, which needs to be, again, redesigned from all the different components and then put back together to ensure that mobility is sustainable, affordable, and that we're reducing greenhouse gas emissions. What this chart means really is that this is a great time to start a company that is focused on climate tech. We have a lot more data sources that are being available for those who want to leverage them and build, for example, their AI models on top of it. And we also have a venture community that is very welcoming to those innovations. So if any students on the call are thinking about starting a company in the sustainability space after graduating, I say go for it. It's a good investment climate to do that right now. And another lever that is being that is really shifting right now, and that is an enabler of the innovations we will see in the next 10 years, is stemming from the federal US government. We have 3 pieces of legislation that passed recently that are dedicated the most funding to climate and sustainability in all of US history. So we have the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, we have infrastructure law, and of course, we have the latest CHIPS Act. All of those put together provide a lot of incentive for both academic institutions to go after the next frontier of innovation, as well as corporations like IBM, which works very closely with academia to keep pushing the boundaries on the science and technology, supporting the solutions to mitigating and adapting to climate change. So yet again, we're seeing great momentum right now. And the fact that US government is putting so much money into that area really is going to turbocharge the development of technologies that we're going to witness over the next 10 years. And then finally, just to put this into context, right? So if you look at the US agency spending on climate and sustainability over the last couple of decades, you can see just how tremendous the current investment from those 3 legislation pieces that I mentioned earlier is compared to this before. And what that's going to do is that going to support companies that need to get through that, the valley of death, where you're going from your initial proof of concept, you're getting your first clients and market validation, and then you need to scale your solution, right? This is where a lot of startups go to perish. This money from the federal government is really going to support the scale of those innovations. Even thinking about ambitious projects such as the direct air capture, right? We have not invented a scalable and economically viable way to do that at the scale needed to capture greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. However, this type of investment from the federal government is actually going to help us continue to do research in that area and close that gap to commercialization and viability. Now let me shift gears and zoom in on IBM and talk a little bit about some of the work that IBM has been historically doing in the climate and sustainability space. Last year, we've been named the technology partner of choice for COP27, and that really demonstrates the commitment from IBM leadership to the topic of climate. We want to make our own operations more sustainable, and we also want to help the clients that IBM is working with on their sustainability journey. We are committing to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, net zero by 2030. And of course, given that IBM's primary business is focused a lot in hardware and enabling computation, we want to make sure that that is sustainable as well. So we're working on every piece of that puzzle, including, for example, making our mainframes easier to recycle, keeping them out of landfills. Finally, if you're interested in learning more about what IBM is doing in that space, I welcome you to read our Impact, Environmental Equity and Sustainability Report, which we publish every year. And from the products perspective, right? So how is IBM helping our clients? We have a suite of products, and we also have a lot of data that we can leverage to build our sustainability solutions on. So for example, not a lot of people know, but IBM actually owns the weather company. And what that translates into is we have access to 9 petabytes of data that we can use to model, to predict, to think about how do we incorporate that knowledge into the suite of sustainability products that IBM is building. We work on, for example, in Visi, one of the divisions of IBM is working on ESG reporting and helping our clients improve those metrics. We support our clients in helping them with their real estate, their offices, making sure that their energy use is managed and reduced, and that their computational capabilities are not really putting a lot of stress on the environment and the grid, which is a continuous journey. But when you're working with top companies in the world, really every little bit that you improve that energy efficiency is tremendously impactful, especially when you think about computation, right? And computation is so energy intensive nowadays. And then finally, we made a commitment to having over 100 research projects on climate and sustainability by 2025. And this is really, given that I work at IBM Research, this is the metric that we're able to drive. We're engaging with governments, NGOs, IBM clients, academic institutions, of course, in pushing forward the climate and sustainability science. Another IBM initiative that I wanted to flag on this call is our sustainability accelerator. We open up call for proposals to organizations that have impact on communities that are being affected by climate change. And we allow them to submit their proposals. If chosen, they work with IBM and get our support and tremendous investment from the technology standpoint over the next 2 years. The current cohort is focused on renewable energy, and the next cohort, which actually is going to be announced at the end of March, is going to be focused on water. So if you're working in your research capacity with organizations that are focused on water, please do keep an eye out for the new cohort announcement and reach out to me if you have any questions. We're always looking for new organizations to support as part of that program. Now let me zoom in even further and talk to you about IBM Research. We are the research division of IBM, and we're doing work across 12 global locations. In 10 of them, the little green dots are where we're doing climate and sustainability work. So what that allows us to do is we work with local governments and municipalities on problems that might be local in nature, but IBM allows us to scale those solutions and make sure we can apply them to different parts of the world, and really use the IBM technologies such as artificial intelligence, hybrid cloud, maybe even quantum in the future, to scale those solutions and make sure that we support our clients and our partners worldwide. Within our climate and sustainability team, one of the focus areas is leveraging geospatial analytics to do a variety of use cases. So here I wanted to highlight just a few and then tell you more about the projects that we've done recently. But fundamentally, we use IBM's infrastructure and architecture to allow us to create those scalable solutions. And then what we create within IBM Research can either become part of IBM suite of products as a new feature or a new product. For example, it can also become a whole new business for IBM. Quantum originated as an IBM Research project. It was scaled, it was incubated, and now it's actually a tremendous business for IBM, where we're one of the global leaders in quantum computing. And then finally, sometimes if our projects within research don't land with the IBM business unit, it could also become an IP income for IBM. We hold one of the largest number of patents from any company worldwide, and that is in large part due to IBM researchers who are focused on the patent generation and research collaboration, publishing papers. So going back to our climate and sustainability work. So if you think about the infrastructure, right, the cloud environments, the AI accelerators, then you add on it foundation models for climate, which is a big focus area for us right now. You can do training, fine-tuning, you do inference, and then you look at what are the different use cases where we can apply that. And the range here is pretty significant, as you can see. We work on natural carbon sequestration, for example, using our geospatial analytics to map out vegetation and see what its propensity to sequester carbon. We also look at soil microbiome and seeing what's the best use of soil, right? Do you leave it bare and allow it to sequester carbon that way? Do you plant something? Do you rotate crops? A lot of questions that are really coming up right now and being explored by the agriculture industry. Then we look at carbon accounting and measurement, right? And how does that translate into insights for supply chain, for the way that businesses operate? We look at greenhouse gas monitoring. We've done a lot of work on methane measurement, for example, which, as you know, is a greenhouse gas that is more potent and stays in atmosphere, which is more potent than CO2, for example, in terms of its warming effect. Renewable energy, going back to the start of the discussion, right? We talked about how there's going to be a lot of federal funding going into renewable energy transition. Europe is much further along than US is on this journey. However, we're definitely reassessing the energy grid. How do we capture renewable energy? How do we store it? So the storage batteries is also a big topic that is going to require a lot of scientific innovation in the coming decades. And then finally, we talked about climate modeling, right? So the extreme weather events, they're becoming more extreme and more frequent. Of course, case in point in California, just because before we started off this call, we talked about the snowfall in Tahoe, right? And that's just one example of what we are seeing from Mother Nature this year, and the year just began, right? So again, using all of these different use cases and then applying technology and IBM's capabilities to it to see how we can have an impact. A few highlights from the projects that we've done. For example, here you're seeing the snapshot using our geospatial analytics platform from February 2020 and April 2020, which you remember was the start of the lockdown around the COVID-19 pandemic. And here you can clearly see the drop in greenhouse gases, right? So using a lot of data that we have access to and then extracting insight from it. That is something that we do on a daily basis at IBM Research. Next one is around vegetation mapping. Again, different data sources, combining them together, running our models on it to allow us to do things like canopy analysis, right? Thinking about how do we model risk of wildfire. And one of the hottest topics right now is carbon sequestration, right? So how do you, given the interest in carbon credits, how do you actually validate that those projects are doing what they say they're doing, right? How do you look at the canopy? How do you analyze the biodiversity, which is part of those forested areas? Because biodiversity is a key factor, as you know, to actually having healthy and forests that are effective in CO2 sequestration. And then finally, a project that has been highlighted very recently is our collaboration with NASA around foundation models for climate. We kicked off a really long-term partnership with NASA to access and process the data that NASA have and make it consumable for other organizations and potentially through open source capabilities to work with the rest of the ecosystem. And apply it to things like hazard mapping, land use, renewable energy forecasting. So all of those use cases that have both governments, enterprises, and smaller startups working on, how do we enable them to leverage NASA's vast and ever-growing data capabilities to tackle some of those important questions. Now, let me talk to you a little bit about our innovation ecosystem strategy, and this is really what I'm driving at IBM Research. So we think about all of the different parts of IBM that work on climate and sustainability. Beyond research, we have a corporate social responsibility team, which runs the sustainability accelerator I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. We have IBM Consulting that helps our clients on their sustainability journey. We have sustainability software that I also listed out a couple of products that we have part of that suite before. And then finally, we have IBM Research, which could be called the tip of the spear because of the innovation that we're bringing to all of parts of IBM. And then all of us work with academic partners, for example. We create consortia, we join consortia run by the industry. We work very closely with governments. For example, the geospatial analytics capabilities that I mentioned earlier. One of our partners is Environmental Climate Change Canada. They're using our products and our data sets to model the impact of changing climate on Canada's communities moving forward. And then, of course, there's venture capital community, incubators, accelerators, and the main way in which we interact with those is through open sourcing some of our capabilities that we build out at IBM Research, and then encouraging others to build on top of it. Mentorship is another angle that we frequently do at IBM. And the funny thing about mentorship is that it's not only the discussion that you have with your mentor, but it's also who can your mentor introduce you to, right? So to give you an anecdote, I've been a mentor at this decarbonization program that we just wrapped up with Mass Challenge. And one of the companies that I mentored is Watts. They're focused on industrial waste management, just really a tremendous company run by two women. And I connected them to folks who are managing industrial waste for all of IBM. So at the very least, you can have a great informative conversation, right? Validate your assumptions as a startup. But also, who knows, there could be a business opportunity down the line that emerges from that. So again, if you're thinking about pursuing startups or starting a company of your own, always, keep your eyes and ears open, because it's not just the person that you're directly talking to. You could also get introduced to somebody who could be very impactful for your business. So again, just highlighting a few partners in our innovation ecosystem. A lot of organizations have tremendous amount of data. So the way that we work with them is thinking about what is the federated way to tap into that data set without having to move it from one place to the other. So working with US national labs, organizations internationally such as Environmental Climate Change Canada, US Department of Energy, NIH, and others to tap into the data that they have. Then we think about the modeling and how do we actually use the data, right? What do we apply it to? Here we have collaborations with a lot of universities, both in the US as well as worldwide. And then finally, we work with organizations that are focused on real-world problems. A couple of partnerships that I wanted to dive deeper into that I'm personally leading. So one is our participation in MIT Climate and Sustainability Consortium, which is a very innovative model of bringing together 18 member companies from different industries. It's IBM, it's Boeing, Accenture, PepsiCo, so very different, not just all technology providers. And then working with MIT directly on different pathways for sustainability research, providing our expertise, our data, but also providing the challenges that we're facing within our organization and seeing if we can tackle that jointly. And that is really one of the exciting things that I find about working in partnerships in climate and sustainability space. The fact that we have such urgency to define and deliver solutions to climate change to market means that we need to change the way that we cooperate and we work with each other. We need to create more fluid dynamics for partnerships where somebody who might not have been considered sitting at the same table now actually have to sit at that same table and have to jointly identify, craft solutions to tackle this global problem. So what that does is it expedites the time that it takes from solution to go from lab to market, but it also opens up more opportunities, right, to collaborate with those that you haven't collaborated with historically in a more open fashion. Then another program that I wanted to highlight is our Discover Accelerator Institute that we launched 2 years ago with University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. We're collaborating on topics such as hybrid cloud, quantum computing, and sustainability is one of the thrusts which I'm leading that looks into topics such as modeling and climate prediction, as well as, for example, we have an exciting project around knowledge hub for CO2 capture materials. So leveraging IBM's research, deep search technology, and combing through a lot of data sets for materials that could capture CO2. And then finally, the last project that I wanted to mention is our collaboration with Stony Brook University. We are bidding to create a climate center on Governor's Island in New York, which is literally an island off of Manhattan. New York City wants to create a Center for Climate Solutions there focused on studying the impact of changing climate on large urban communities. So that's a project that we're currently in the process of bidding for. And then hopefully later this year, we will find out whether or not our team of partners won this opportunity or not. But this really gives you a taste and a sense of the range of projects that could be considered for partnerships, originating with research, right? Scientific research. And then how do you work with other institutions on that research? How do you implement and scale it? And then how do you bring it together to a large urban community like New York and make it a beacon for climate and sustainability research worldwide? Few other projects to mention: how we work with global community of climate innovators. Again, we strongly believe that solutions to the climate challenge will come from companies big and small and everybody working together. So the way for us to do that is to engage with partners that tap into that ecosystem. So for example, Mass Challenge and Capital Partners just last week wrapped up a decarbonization accelerator. Startups applied to be part of it. And then for 6 weeks, 10 finalists went through a rigorous curriculum to help them shape their value proposition, define better their pitch to investors, and then they had a demo day. Again, throughout that whole process, we were involved there in mentorship capacity. A very interesting collaboration that we have is with International Science Reserve. And International Science Reserve is an organization that is actually rooted in coming out of COVID-19 pandemic. To tackle and address the COVID pandemic crisis and to search for solutions, very quickly an HPC, high performance computing consortium was formed, and IBM was a founding member and a very active part of it. After the pandemic started to wind down, at least in the US, the decision was made that, look, there's going to be more global crises moving forward. And it's important to have this access to a global community of scientists that we can tap into and activate it when the next crisis happens. And that's how International Science Reserve was born, with that premise in mind. And what IBM does is we contribute our, for example, geospatial analytics tools to this toolbox that a team of global distributed scientists will have access to once the new global challenge strikes and International Science Reserve activates all of those scientists and says, look, this is the call for proposals. We need people to do research on this crisis. And this is a set of tools that you can leverage as you're working on it, with our IBM's tools being part of that toolkit. So again, really exciting stuff happening as we speak. And, we do hope that there's not going to be a new global crisis, but unfortunately, most likely there will be. And some of that is definitely going to stem from the changing climate. And then finally, AI for Planet is our collaboration with Boston Consulting Group, again, working with 10 various startups to see how we can support them and enable them in informing climate solutions. So finally, I want to leave you with this African proverb, which really resonates. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But as Mila Rosenthal, who is leading the International Science Reserve that I just described to you, said to me earlier this year, we need to do both. In order to solve the climate crisis, we need to go fast and we need to go far. And that means thinking creatively about the work that we do and the way that we engage with others. Finally, I want to leave you with a couple of recommendations. Just again, my personal favorites in terms of the books that I've read on how we can tackle the climate crisis and sustainability. Probably my favorite is Ministry for the Future. It's climate sci-fi, but it rings true. It starts off with a tremendous heat wave hitting India, and then describes, well, what can the world do about it, right? How can we shift away and become more sustainable? What are some of those mechanisms that could potentially be implemented to make sure that organizations and countries are accountable to the targets that they put in place? And again, oftentimes I read the news and I think to myself, oh, wow, this is really directly from the Ministry for the Future. So I recommend you read that book. And then in terms of staying up to date with what's happening, the Green Daily newsletter from Bloomberg is great in terms of highlighting most current issues that are happening in climate and sustainability space. The Climate Optimist from Harvard, I believe it's a monthly newsletter, but what it does, it focuses on the positive news in climate space. And we definitely all need that because, as you've seen from my opening slide, oftentimes it's very much doom and gloom, right? If you look at climate news, and oftentimes people just become desensitized to that. There's only so much negative news that you can process. But Climate Optimist really elevates the projects that are being successful, the solutions that are being scalable, the organizations that are really doing tremendous impact in this space. And then finally, talking about podcasts, my latest favorite has been Zero by Bloomberg Green. Really great material, usually about 35-40 minutes, so small digestible chunks, talking about latest events in the climate space, very provocative interviews, talking to world leaders and really pushing them on, all right, so you're saying this is your climate agenda, these are your actions, how do those align? My favorite interview was with Justin Theroux from Canada, and that was definitely something that the interviewer was pushing for. So with all of that said, I would love to thank you for joining me. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I'd like to open this up for discussion.
Great, wonderful, thanks, Marina. That was so much information. I learned so much. Thanks. Yes, please, let's open this up to questions and comments. Maybe we'll give it a couple seconds for folks to compose their thoughts, type it into the chat, or please raise your hand if you would like to vocalize your thoughts or questions or comments. Just give it a couple seconds for folks to compile their thoughts. I have a ton of questions, so I'm very happy to start. But all right, so I'll take the liberty to start to ask. So I'm Marina. Thanks so much. I'm very curious about the sustainability accelerator that you described earlier. A lot of the projects that you described as being part of the accelerator or affiliated or supported by it are really big, really sort of fantastic big data, like global level data visuals, things like that. Those of us who work much more closely with adaptation typically talk about adaptation as a much more local thing. I mean, communities building response capacity to very specific impacts. I'm wondering if you can maybe just off the top of your head, think of examples of technologies that you've seen work in accelerating adaptation at the more local community level. Is that a space that IBM is really interested in? I don't know what the business opportunities are in that space, but I'm just curious if there are more local, regional kind of adaptation accelerating technologies that you've seen that are successful or on the way to being successful.
No, this is an excellent question. And in my opinion, the fact that IBM is so broad in terms of the work that we're doing, that also allows us to dedicate resources to maybe something that is, like you're saying, not a tremendous business opportunity, but is a tremendous impact opportunity, right? And the way we usually work with it is we can work on a small localized project, but we want to make sure that that solution to localized problem, right, can be something that we can implement elsewhere so that it's scalable. So one example that I can think of is how we're using our geospatial analytics capabilities that I described, right? 9 petabytes of data, massive computational power. But one of the projects we've done is, for example, to map the types of trees that grow in Manhattan. And once you have that, you can translate that into their propensity to sequester carbon. And once you have that, you can look at urban desert islands, right? The heat deserts, where you don't have a lot of vegetation and you want to implement, let's say, a public green space. And you can say, all right, and these are the types of trees that should actually be in that public space, right? In order to help the community and have the most impact. So that is one dimension. I can highlight a project that we're doing with Wits University in South Africa. So again, I haven't touched a lot on that because my presentation was mainly US centric, but as you saw from our global map of IBM Research locations, we do a lot of work in India, in Asia, in Africa, in Central and South America as well. And so with Wits University, we actually have a NIH grant that we applied for and received. And we're looking into impact of extreme heat on maternal health in Africa. So again, that is a challenge that is relevant to the whole continent, but specifically to various communities that we're working closely with. So that's a long answer to your question, saying that, yes, we work with local organizations providing support for their communities, but always keep a bigger problem that we're trying to solve in mind.
Thanks, Marina. That's fantastic. Thanks. Other thoughts from the floor? Yeah. Can always launch into more questions. Don't want to dominate the discussion. Maybe let's wait a couple more seconds here. Yeah. All right. So maybe I'll ask a second question. This may be much more sort of in your purview. In terms of the university partnerships, Marina, you were talking about earlier. Say if, this is just opportunity, if UC Davis were to be interested in participating in the, not exactly the same, but similar types of partnerships that you mentioned with MIT and others, what are sort of the building blocks of those relationships? What are the initial ingredients that you've seen really get these partnerships going? And what are the types of co-benefits that one can expect? Clearly, I'm not in a position to initiate anything, but I'm just curious because it seems like from what you're talking about, there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of opportunity for research co-production. There's a lot of opportunities for even the workforce pipeline, possibly kind of connecting our students with the business world outside for career opportunities. There's a lot of revenue opportunities as well, as you mentioned right at the beginning. What are some building blocks? So if a university comes to you or IBM and says, oh, this is a space that we'd like to participate in, what is sort of the initial checklist of things that you've seen being offered? Yeah.
Right. So that's another really good question. And the way we usually approach academic partnerships is, number one, we want to make sure that there's a kind of a broad topical relevance. And where we see the most success is when multiple departments come together and, for example, say, we're going to form this overarching initiative on climate and sustainability, right? And then that becomes our gateway to the physics department, computer science department, right? You name it, law school, business school, everybody coming together to rally around the single topic. So that's number one, right? We're always looking for that more overarching initiative rather than direct, professor to IBM researcher interaction. Because, while that could be, valuable and result in a paper, it's not really going to have the impact that something much bigger and significant could have. So that's one avenue, right? And then as an output of that, we usually get together. We talked about the areas of research that we're driving within our team. Professors present opportunities, something that they're working on, and then we look for synergies, right? And we say, for example, we always want to see our technology validated in the field. So, we give you access to our geospatial analytics. Can you use it for this new project that you're developing, right? If it works well, maybe we can collaborate on a government grant opportunity, right? If you are setting up this, let's say, community engagement hub, right? Can IBM participate with you on that through our workforce training programs, right? So again, it kind of, once the partnership is successful, it becomes a magnet and it attracts resources from IBM as well as from the university, right? And the output of that, like you mentioned, it could be offering internship and externships to students to come to IBM. For example, our headquarters is in Yorktown Heights, just 40 minutes north of New York City. And in the summer, the place is buzzing with students from different global universities that are participating and working on research projects with us. We primarily work with graduate students, but the rest of IBM certainly has opportunities for undergrad interns as well. So that's one avenue, right? Then we co-author papers, we publish them. Sometimes that results in expanded collaboration, renewed partnerships. So again, it's a very fluid process, but the most important thing is to have that access to multiple departments, which help create really interesting problems, right? That we can all jointly solve using IBM's technology and pursue the academic focus that the professors are working on.
Yeah, just to follow up here, just thinking out loud, not promising anything. Our Center for Climate Adaptation, our Climate Adaptation Research Center, is in essence one of those institutional bodies, as you may call it, that try to get at this. Marina, exactly. We're sort of a large umbrella form organization, maybe group at UC Davis, and we're with the explicit objective of collecting and convening folks who are working in this space. We're from all different departments: medical school, engineering. I'm myself urban planning, social sciences, and so we're always sort of pitching ourselves as this group that's super multidisciplinary, very solution oriented, very kind of problem solution driven. And so something like that sounds promising. So something we might want to talk about offline, bringing other relevant people there. But I do have a follow-up question here is, I do see some students here on the call. What are the sorts of skills, background, expertise? I guess it really depends on what kinds of projects we're talking about, but in general, what are the kinds of skills, expertise, backgrounds of students, knowing what you know about UC Davis from your undergrad not that long ago. What are the sorts of skills and expertise that you see are particularly suitable for this type of environment that you're describing?
Right. So for us, it's definitely more in having familiarity with AI, using models, working with
Mm,
large data sources, seeing how you can combine that data, how do you leverage the models on top of that, and also definitely having that, that thirst for knowledge and the willingness to learn, right? Because technology moves very quickly. Our focus shifts, we develop new technology that we always want to integrate and test on the projects that we're developing. So having that willingness to learn a new system, right? Dive into a new model, propose your solution. That's really the type of capabilities that that we're looking for. And humbly, I will add that in the climate space, we really want to tap into the students' interest in the topic, right? We want to find those who really want to make a tangible difference, who are passionate about it. And then we enable them to work with us during an internship, for example, with our partners who work closely. I mentioned, NASA, NOAA, really all of the large players in the climate data ecosystem, and then seeing what we can solve together.
That's great. Yeah, we do have a large group of data science folks on campus, so that's great. We'll connect offline on that front. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We do have maybe 2-3 minutes left before we need to wrap up, respecting Marina's time. You might have to go to something else. Maybe final thoughts, questions from the floor. Quiet group today. You might remember, Marina, we're on a quarter system, and we're currently in week 9, and so you might remember how hectic week 9 and 10 could be, and so that might explain. But I'm glad folks just are logging in to just learn about this, and it's just wonderful, the amount of information and the insights, Marina, you're sharing. I'm just so impressed by the different projects that the IBM Research is engaged with. Maybe I'll turn it over to you, Marina, not to put you on the spot, but any final thoughts to offer all of us before we close the session?
Yes, so I think this will be addressed to the students who are either listening right now or who will be looking at this recording later. What I really tried to communicate with my presentation is that there's both tremendous urgency and tremendous opportunity in the space of climate tech solutions. And that means that you have so many options to choose from. If you want to dedicate your time to solving this challenge, you can join existing companies that are doing tremendous work in that space, right? You can join somebody like IBM Research, who is doing research that is applied to some of the industry use cases. And then finally, you can start something of your own, right? So I think right now it's a great time to focus on both mitigation and adaptation space. And by the fact that you're listening to this webinar, you are interested in this topic. So I encourage you to, stay thirsty for knowledge, make connections with those who are already working in that space. I regularly personally mentor folks who reach out and say, I want to get into the climate solution space. How do I do it? Right? This is my skill set. How do I apply? And I think those who are still in school, you actually have a leg up because you can shape your skill set right now and get the relevant experiences to get you to working in that climate solution space. So again, very exciting times, and best of luck with whatever you end up doing after UC Davis.
Thanks. Great, wonderful. Thank you so much, Maria. That's wonderful. Great, thanks for sharing about your work and all the wonderful, exciting projects. We're just coming up on 11 o'clock here in Pacific time zone, and so we are supposed to close our session. So I just want to thank you again, Marina, for spending this hour with us and sharing your thoughts. And thank you to the audience for being here. And we will post the recording fairly soon after this session on our center website. And so folks can review and watch that. And we do have a couple events, more webinars coming up, building off of Marina and the wonderful series that Sophia has helped to lead and guide and facilitate. those announcements will keep coming. So look out for those emails. Our next one is 2 weeks from today. We have Professor Miriam Solis at UT Austin talking about the green transition, labor, workforce development, and environmental justice. And then we have 2 weeks after that, another UCD alum talking about Sacramento's climate action plan update. And so that's to look forward to. Super, super diverse. Lovely to have Marina here again, representing the private sector, business sector. Often we find that for us here at the university setting, that voice is sometimes not as strong as the other voices, especially for here at UC Davis. So it's wonderful to have you again. And here are the socials. I hope, Marina, it's okay if folks reach out to you if they have specific questions about anything, or they want to learn, or just maybe potentially have informational talks about opportunities. I'm not supposed to volunteer for anything, but hopefully that's an avenue that's worth pursuing. And
Absolutely.
folks can send their yeah, great. And folks can send their queries and questions either through us, and then we can forward that directly to Marina, or hopefully reach out to you directly. Great. Thank you again, Marina, for spending this hour. It's wonderful to see everyone, and have a good rest of the week. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Such a pleasure. Bye.
Bye.